Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Craig Newman.
All right. Oh, live from Aspen. Oh, yeah, it's Promoter 101. And I'm telling you that it's Promoter 101. And I love it. It's Promoter 101. And I love it. Alright, live with Steiny. At the limelight, just me and a few friends, yeah, getting it on with Promoter 101.
I'm Amy Morrison. I work at Concerts West, AEG Presents, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Breaker, radio check. This is the Jew. Come on back with a Big 10-4, as this is the Promoter 101 podcast. Coming at you like never before. So put the pedal to the metal and the metal to the floor. Come on back for episode 113. You got your ears on good, buddy?
I sure do, Dan. Feeling your excitement, feeling the love this week, man. And I know you promised a big guest for this podcast this week. And dear God, did you ever deliver, as we're going to be joined later by Metallica HQ's own Marc Reiter here this week, sitting down with us during the Aspen Live Music Conference to talk about working with the hottest band in the world in Metallica. And is that not enough? We've got Psyko Steve Chilton, sitting down to chat with us about competing as an independent promoter in a really crowded marketplace down in Arizona. And later on, a war story with Axs Ticketings Greg Schmale. And that one's going to be a treat for all of our professional wrestling fans out there.
Plus, Luke will have the news of the week.
I'm Toby Mamus. I work at Alive Enterprises, managing Alice Cooper, and I'm on the Promoter 101 podcast, whatever that is.
Don't forget, we're starting the new year off right with a live podcast in Philly, PA. Promoter 101 will be recording the live show Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. That's right. Start putting 2019 on your checks instead of 2018 if you still actually write checks opposed to having a debit card, because we'll be in Philly, PA.
I thought I had a joke, but my brain's not firing that fast. I thought I had something there, but my brain's just really not working well today. It was a long night in Hollywood last night, Dan. You can catch us this January. We're going to be at the campus of the University of the Arts at the Kaplan Recital Hall, featuring an amazing guest in Live Nation's Jeff Gordon, the man behind Made in America. You Philly fans down there who've been enjoying that festival for the last couple of years, come on down to the University of the Arts. You can hear about how it all gets started.
Luke, you think he'll be able to talk to us about his double life as a race car driver and concert promoter?
See, I didn't even know that he was leading such a double life or that he raced cars, Dan. So now I'm going to learn something in this panel. More reason for people to come out to this thing. What time is this thing starting?
Well, it's the 6:30 door, 7 o'clock show, but isn't Jeff Gordon one of the most famous race car drivers of all time? Possibly a different Jeff Gordon?
Possibly a different Jeff Gordon. See, this is my brain catching up to what you're saying right now. Now I'm getting it, Dan.
You're picking up what I'm putting down.
I'm picking up what you're putting down,
Clearly not the same Jeff Gordon.
Clearly not the same Jeff Gordon.
My humor apparently is a tightrope act today. We'll be there at 7 o'clock. It's a small room. It's free. Come one, come all. It'll be a good time. And it seems like we're going to be drinking some more afterwards and hanging with the crew. So come out, hang with us. If you can stump me or Luke, we'll buy you the shots that night. That's how that's going to play.
If we stump you buy us a cheesesteak, though. You're going to do Pat's or Geno's in this trip, Dan?
I say we do both because, you only live once and damn it, you're never in Philly enough.
That's true. In fact, for all the Philly fans out there, this is not an endorsement of either Pat's or Geno's. In fact, I would much rather prefer Steve's Princess Steaks or Philly favorite of Ishkabibbles. And so maybe we'll hit up all four. Who knows, Dan? It could be a wild day.
I'm going to Uber from Pat's over to Geno's.
Wow.
You got to be a Philly person to get that joke.
Sometimes I feel like I need an Uber from Pat's to Gino's after like cheesesteak and cheese fries. Like I just want to be rolled over there in some sort of like wheelchair.
Anyway, we're fucking coming to Philly if you hadn't picked up on that. And we want to see you there. By the way, it's time for us to plug where you can hear the podcast.
Where can you hear the podcast, Dan? We've got some options, right?
Right. Well, it's easy to find, including the place you're probably listening to us right now. But if you want other options, we're on Spotify now, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Music, and sometimes we're live right in front of you at a conference, although we've been turning them all down lately. So not as many as in the past.
A lot of demand, Dan. A lot of demand for it.
Well, you want to keep it fresh. So, sometimes you just want to sit in the audience and not speak and hear other people talk for a change.
Did you do that last week, Dan? I found it at some point during the Aspen Live music conference that you and I and Aunt Taylor were in the back of the room being snarky. That was like a regular thing last week?
It was like the director's cut. We got to hear, the smart ass shit that goes on in the room while people up there talking. And it's great to be one of those people for a change instead of the people that everybody's talking shit about. We are actually talking shit about all the other people. So that was nice.
I don't know if that's any different, right?
It isn't, but it's nice when you don't have a microphone so you can be a little bit more mean.
I do recall us laughing a little bit harder than we probably would on stage in that moment. So I can't remember exactly what we said, but I remember laughing pretty hard at it.
As long as we're here, let's talk about Aspen for a second. I want to say I thought David Marcus was amazing, and he was probably the best speaker of the weekend. Always great info. Guy should be a politician. He is so smooth and slick. It's like always a great message.
And Dan, I had to leave a little early on Saturday this year. Anything eventful happen on Saturday at the panels?
No, the panel was Rock and Roll Jeopardy, and the guy that was hosting was so lame at it that Marc Reiter actually took over and was with Craig Newman, and they were doing it off the top of their head to stump the audience. But the first round of questions, all the groups went 100%, and it was questions like, with the Van Halen 1984 album cover, can you identify either the band or the name of the album? And it didn't get much harder from there. This is definitely not the crew for that. But Marc Reiter and Craig, they mixed it up pretty good, and it became a much harder game once we got some pros in there.
And only one injury this year, and all the skiing, and all of the snowmobiling, and all the walking around downtown Aspen in boots, just, one lowly broken arm from our buddy Jonathan Shank.
The update on that is he doesn't have to have surgery, and it looks like a little bit of a heel recovery time for him, but he's going to be okay.
He'll get really good at using Siri and one-handed typing, I'm sure.
It's probably time for Luke to plug where you can listen to us on Twitter.
That's right, Dan. We do all the social media things. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook. Personally, I'm W. Luke Pierce. Dan is at The Jew. This show, Promoter 101, is Promoters or Promoter 101, whichever one you like. We've got them all, thanks now to Jason Bernstein.
We love us some Jason Bernstein. And if we're going to give some shout outs and love, how about that special acoustic live intro this week from Craig Newman? Holy shit, that was good.
Craigie Fresh doing Tongue Bath Live. I love it.
That sounded explicit, but that is the name of the song. Anyway, if you want to catch up with us, tell us what you think, give us a hard time, whatever. You can always email us at steiny@promoter101.net. That email is running nonstop 24/7, 365. It is always up for your pleasure.
That is right, Dan.
This is Greg Schmale from Axs Ticketing, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Hey, I know a lot of you reminded us that we got out of order for the reissue of the week, and I apologize for that. I clearly just am an idiot. If you've missed any of the past podcasts, you can always catch up. Don't worry, we got them saved for you on that World Wide Web thing. Just enter www.promoter101.net into that magical computer device browser window, and it'll bring you to us. Go back and listen to episode 68 this week while you catch up on past episodes.
That's right, Dan. Episode 68, quite the doozy. We had WME's Peter Schwartz on the podcast. He's one of the reigning kings of hip-hop in the agency world. Broke down what he's working on and what that looks like today.
Rival Entertainment buyer, promoter, partner, Lucy Lawler Freeze talks to us about being an indie in the marketplace. And, there are a lot of indies, but how many of them are doing stadium shows? I mean, she really is on all levels just killing it.
And now running the Fox in Atlanta. Very, very interesting sit down with Lucy. And we were later joining that podcast, a man from Ithaca, DSP's Dan Smalls Presents, sat down with us for a war story. He also brought us some really cool hats that day, Dan.
He did bring us some swag. I love me some Dan Smalls. Hey, if you're sitting on the pot and you're just killing some time, why not drop us a review? It's a small thing you could do for us to make our day better. And isn't that the biggest concern you got right now? How you can make me and Luke happy?
I need everyone to like us so much.
And when you're done with that, call your mother.
Call your mother.
Call your mother.
Hi, this is Dave Fry, welcoming you to Promoter 101. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia, Silent Partner Management.
News of the week.
Well, hey, it's that time once again where W. Luke Pierce shares the insights and happenings around the music industry just for you, so you don't have to read any of those emails that Polestar, Billboard, Celebrity Access, Amplify send to your email daily about all of these things anyway. But hey, he's breaking it down just for you. Here he is, W. Luke Pierce.
It's time for News of the Week. Music's Biggest Night now has the list of music's biggest nominations. On December 7th, the Recording Academy announced the 2019 Grammy nominations. That's the 61st Annual Grammy Awards that are going to be hosted in New York for the second time coming February 10th on CBS. Kendrick Lamar leads the pack with 8 nominations, and Drake follows with 7. Brandi Carlile earning 6, the most nominated female this year. Cardi B, Childish Gambino, H.E.R., Lady Gaga, Merritt Morris, and producer Soundwave and mastering engineer Mike Bosey all had 5 nominations. And for the big 4 categories, they expanded the number of nominations this year. Record of the year looking like Cardi B with I Like It, Brandi Carlile with The Joke, Childish Gambino's This Is America, Drake's God's Plan, Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper's Shallow, all the rock stars from Kendrick Lamar and SZA, Rockstar from Post Malone, and The Middle with Zedd and Merritt Morris. Album of the year, Cardi B's Invasion of Privacy, Brandi Carlile's By the Way I Forgive You, Drake's Scorpion, H.E.R.'s self-titled album, Post Malone's Beer Bongs and Bentleys, Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer, and Casey Musgraves, the CMA Best Album of the Year award winner, Golden Hour, and Black Panther, the album, music from and inspired by Kendrick Lamar. New Artist of the Year nominations included Chloe and Halle, Luke Combs, Greta Van Fleet, H.E.R., Margot Price, BB Rexa, and Georgia Smith. You'll have to tune in on February 10th to see who takes home the gold prizes. It's been a rather shitty fourth quarter for stocks in America, and the Chinese streaming giant Tencent Music entered a pretty banged-up U.S. market today, raising $1.1 billion by offering up 82 million shares on the NYSE under ticker symbol TME. The $1.1 billion that was raised today was raised at a $21.3 billion valuation, which is slightly less than the $24 billion that Spotify was valued when it entered the market earlier this year. Finally, capping off and sandwiching this news segment with more nominations, Polestar, the industry's biggest live touring conference, announced their awards this week, which included a revamped format, including some of my fan favorite categories, which included the Unavailable Award, the award given to people that you never return phone calls, including Jeff Schumann from Golden Voice, Johnny Beach, Bob Rue, Irving Azoff, and Jay Williams. I also like the Most Dreaded Phone Call Award, which included Irving Azoff, Kirk Summer, Don Fox, Jerry Berard, Howard Rose, Jeff Frasco, and of course, Aaron Pincus. Congratulations to all the nominees. Look out for the full list of awards available at awards.polestar.live. The 30th annual Polestar Awards are February 13th at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. That'll do it for News of the Week.
Hello, this is Matt Smitty Smith from the UC Theater in Berkeley, California, and I'm here on Promoter 101.
Dan, did you really think that we were going to forget to announce the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week?
I didn't. It's in the script. It's right here.
Oh.
This week, Badass of the Week. Veteran promoter from the 10,000 Lakes region, Rose Presents' own Gene Hollister is this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Thank you so much for taking all of Aspen out for a hike and in showing them the great outdoors, the wildlife, the scenery, and maybe even some of that legal marijuana in Colorado. Gene Hollister, give it up for you. Thank you so much. You are an inspiration for all of the kids.
Not only did he do the nature hike and the dispensary visits, he also took me over to meet Rick Schultz, the autograph source, and got to spend some time with him. So Gene, just an incredible ambassador, one of the, quite literally the biggest, maybe tallest promoter with Randy Levy and Rose Presents in the Minneapolis area. And just a great guy you should know.
They're both some serious tall guys, and they look like Bond villains, particularly Gene. But he's got the sweetest heart, and he's lovable. So you went to Rick Schultz's store last week, and he's been on the podcast. We love him. Actually, I think Gene might have introduced me to him the first time going back 15 years.
That's what he said. He said that Gene took Sonia Grover there. He took you there. He took me there. He's like been like an ambassador for Rick Schultz's place over the past couple of years. And that was a really cool experience and a trip. And if you're ever in Aspen, check him out. Rick Schultz's store is called the Autograph Source. A bunch of presidential historian kind of stuff, like signed stuff from like he had a lot of Bush 41 stuff, which was very timely. He had like a ton of sports stuff, some music stuff. So if you nerd out to that kind of historical memorabilia, autograph stuff, Autograph Source. It's a man who can literally seem like so you can find everything.
I had coffee with Rick while I was there last week, and we talked about the possibility of maybe him starting his own podcast about the collector world, which I thought was a great idea and fascinating because the history and knowing what is valuable, what isn't, how you actually verify it, how you put a value to it, especially things that you can't get anymore, like Edison handwriting, a patent out for a light bulb in another country and what that patent handwritten by Edison himself is worth.
I mean, he had like tax returns from JFK that were signed. He had letters from like John Quincy Adams. He says he sold like more than like a dozen George Washington authenticated signed things over the past year. So it's not just that. It's music history. He had a lot of Hunter S. Thompson stuff, which was crazy valuable. So a lot of cool stuff and really cool, like you said, Dan, to hear about how you verify that and how costly that shit is. I mean, it was a pretty fascinating thing. I probably spent 45 minutes talking to Rick about that.
Yeah, it turns out most of the stuff you buy online that's autographed isn't really the real thing. So like a guy like Rick, who is in Aspen and has that prime real estate, he has to have authentic stuff. And by the way, your Christmas present from past years from the Alan Sorkin signed West Wing clip came directly from Rick's store.
When I first met him at the Belly Up during the opening reception on Thursday night, Sonia Grover introduced us. He said, "This is Rick from the Autograph Store." And I said, it's the first thing I said to him. I said, "I have you to thank for one of the very nicest gifts that I've ever received from Dan Steinberg," which was the signed pilot script of The West Wing, signed by show creator, showrunner, and head writer for the first 4 seasons of the best episodes of television ever made in The West Wing by Aaron Sorkin.
He said that one was a little bit of a challenge to find.
I could see that. I mean, one, just finding that working script would probably have been tough because, I mean, it's like an actual set shot script. Like it's got like a little bit of wear to it. Like somebody was reading it on the set. And then to like get that and then to get Sorkin at like some conference or panel to get him to sign something, I'd imagine was probably not the easiest thing in the world.
Well, let's digress into a little bit of entertainment, should we?
We should. Although that was entertaining.
Well, at least it was for us.
Hey, this is Kirk Peterson. I work for Dayglow Presents, and I'm on Promoter 101.
In our featured interview this week, Dan sat down with Metallica HQ's very own Marc Reiter, manager, guy who runs the shop over at Metallica's management camp, to talk about the hottest band working on the planet in Metallica.
Our Aspen sessions continue, and I'm hanging out with Marc Reiter. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dan. Good to be here.
I've had the pleasure through this conference of knowing you for good part of my career. You have always been on the management side of things as long as I've known you. Has that always been the case for your industry?
Not always, but certainly for the better part of it. I got my start working in a record store way back when there were record stores. Actually, there still are, thanks to vinyl. But I started back when I was 17, 1981. Got a job working for a record company in 1984. Did that until 1992, when I left to go to work at Q Prime. Was there for 24 years and then been with Metallica for the last 2.5 years.
When you went to work for Metallica, you switched coasts. You put a lot of time on the East Coast, and now you're living in the Bay. So that's quite a life change late in your career.
It was quite a life change. My wife and I have been East Coasters our whole life, and I've always wanted to live on the West Coast. The lifestyle suited me quite a bit, but we raised our family on the East Coast, and once our daughters had going to school and the nest was empty, as they say, we thought that was a good time to do it, and it coincided with an amazing opportunity that the band presented.
Going from one of the busiest hustle-bustle cities in the world to one of the more relaxed communities in the world, how has that changed lifestyle?
It's changed it dramatically. I can't say that San Francisco is one of the more relaxed communities. It certainly has that reputation, but the tech capital of the world is the Bay Area, and it's moved from Silicon Valley or the South Bay Area. It's spread all the way up now, and San Francisco itself has so many of those companies either are headquartered in San Francisco or at least have moved a significant part of their business up to San Francisco as well. It's really become an action-packed city as well. It certainly doesn't have the same hustle and bustle as New York, but there is an energy in the city of San Francisco that rivals New York in a lot of ways, and it's got a vibe, that's for sure.
So you work for one of the biggest bands in the world. There's no debating that Metallica, when you think of metal, when you think of pop rock, when you think of rock and roll bands, they're one of the top.
No argument for me.
You guys are on one of the most successful tours in the history of music, and it's been going on for a couple cycles now. Stadiums, arenas, everything's selling out. When you're building something like that, and this is what, basically a 3-year cycle?
So far, we're about 2 years and a few months into the cycle, and we've got about a year, maybe a year plus left on the cycle. So, yeah.
So you've got what is one of the biggest legacy acts with one of the biggest catalogs on the road. Anytime you go out there with new products, new tours, you're balancing working the new album, but you're also balancing keeping fans from the entire catalog satisfied and happy at a decent ticket price, making sure the fans are entertained and keeping production levels as high as possible because you guys keep raising the bar, something that seems like you guys have always driven with.
That's a great point. And honestly, I don't know how much I can add to that. I mean, yes, that is the case. I think in this business, in this industry as a whole, it's much less driven by the album tour model that it once was driven by. Certainly a lot of artists, and definitely in the pop area, it is song and album driven for tours. And that does promote people to go out on the road more than anything else. But I think when you get to a certain point in your career, you don't need a new album or new music to go out. It helps to promote. But nowadays, people don't listen to the radio as much. They don't look to new music to say, I'm going to go out and see Metallica, or I'm going to go out and see U2. It could be, in U2's case, one of the biggest tours they've had recently was a 30th anniversary for the Joshua Tree. There's a lot of different vehicles that cause bands to go out and tour, and there's a lot of different vehicles that cause people to say, I want to see them. It could just be the fact that the band hasn't been in a particular marketplace for so many years. So a long-winded answer is to say that, yes, the Hardwired to Self-Destruct album, which came out a little over 2 years ago, is a good reason for us to go out and play shows around that album with a theme for the tour being the visuals from that album for a long period of time. But in that span, since we've released that album, we've re-released 3 box sets of albums from the band's catalog. We've released a whiskey. We've released a line of Nixon watches. We've done a line of Van sneakers. So there's constantly things that are happening that further increase awareness of the mothership, as we like to say.
Well, it's an interesting comment because I know in the case with this band, you guys are very particular about what you do put your name on and what you associate with. You're very protective of what the fans see because when you put your name on something, you're owning it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think James is really the first line of defense on that.
I wouldn't go that far to say James is the first line of defense. James has a fantastic bullshit detector, but they all do. I mean, Lars is a fantastic businessman. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy. He has a great eye and ear for what's happening in business. He's got a good eye on the tech sector right now. So he knows a lot of what's happening. He's a good barometer for what's happening in business and in popular culture. James is a very good barometer for, does this make sense for Metallica or not? But Lars is there too, and the other guys as well.
That has to get through the gauntlet of Metallica themselves before something have their name put on it. They're not just taking any dollar thrown at them. It's like,
no, we say no far more than we say
there's
yes.
no Metallica George Foreman type of grill coming out.
There is not a Metallica George Foreman grill, nor will there ever be Metallica caskets. And I think that says it all.
Production-wise, the show is amazing, and I know that's not your part of the shop, but the band's show is high production to the point where they're one of those bands now, Metallica, Pearl Jam, U2, the Rolling Stones. When you look at a stadium show, there's only so many bands that play at that level that can bring a show like that, and they're up there. They're one of those 10 bands that can do that anywhere in the world. And it hasn't always been the case. Coming off the Black album, that seemed like they were as big as they were ever going to be. And bands are roller coasters. They go up and down. Bands don't usually have that moment a second time, but you guys have not only come back, and they never went away. They were always an arena band, but selling out stadiums by themselves and doing grosses like they've never done before, not on the Black album kind of business. Like, they're setting records and killing it. So to come back full circle and be on top a second time, it's unheard of almost.
You've just hit the nail right on the head, Dan. You said something in that statement that I've quoted exactly in the past with the band, and that is the term a moment. I've said before, and believe me, I'm not the first, as you know, to say this, but it's a rare feat for any band to even get to the level where they can record music that people want to hear, that they can go out and play music live that a number of people want to see. For the band to go beyond that and really hit critical mass and become vastly successful, the odds are so much greater. For the band to hit worldwide superstardom and to have, as you've said and I've said to them, a moment, and that moment for Metallica was the Black Album, is, the 1/10 of 1% or 1/100th of 1% of bands get that moment. I think they know it, and bands that have those moments know how incredibly fortunate they are. And you know what? You don't know when you're recording an album that you're going to have that moment. It's luck, it's timing, it is absolutely talent. But, sometimes the stars align and there happens to be that one song or a bunch of songs on that record, and there's touring, and there's all of those things. It's a ton of hard work leading up to it, artist development, blah, 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 blah. But again, when you have that moment, it's lightning in a bottle. All of that said, to have a second moment, I don't know if you can count on 3 or 4 fingers the number of bands that have had 2 moments. And last summer when we were playing stadiums in the United States, which, by the way, was the first time Metallica ever headlined stadiums in the United States or in North America.
Because the exception would be the co-headline with Guns, right?
Right, but that was a
you
co-headline.
You got to share that.
Yes. The first time the band ever headlined stadiums on their own in North America. That's a second moment. It just doesn't happen. It was not unappreciated by the band. I mean, those guys, it's an incredible thing. They know how 37 years into their career, how damn lucky they are. And at the same time, they also know how damn hard they've worked in 37 years and continue to work. But they play every show like it's the last show they are ever going to play. Because they know at this point in their lives, at this point in their careers, anything could happen, good or bad. So they go out there and they give everything they've got. And it shows. And I think that's a huge reason why people come back and why social media says what it says about the show being so great and why more people want to see them, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that they're having a second moment, it's just a remarkable thing and a testament to their hard work and their talent.
Now, I'm a nerd when it comes to this band. Once or twice a year, you and me have a fun conversation where you'll let me in on some insight of Metallica and we'll have a drink and I'll nerd out on stuff. Last year, I saw what I would say is the most sensory deprivation event I've seen in my life, where you were nice enough to put me in the pit at a stadium show with the band running around me and the screens and the explosions and all of the fans. I've been to thousands of shows, but I've never been in the middle of anything like that. Blew my mind. What they have built production-wise, on top of the fact that the catalog is amazing. As they go through the set list, there's not an unknown song. There's not a B-list song. They have such a deep catalog. It's insane. The funniest part of seeing the show in Seattle was I flew out the next day. So I saw the number of people wearing T-shirts at the airport. And I was kind of blown away by that. So I remember calling you a couple days later and saying, you pull a zip code list for any of this stuff and see how far people are coming from? Because it's insane. And we talked about that was when doing stadium shows, that was a decision that they were going to be destination shows. And you guys weren't going to play every market. And that clearly was working. You guys are pulling from way out of the market.
Yeah. The band made a conscious decision a number of years ago that they're only going to play a certain number of shows every year. And it's a lot of shows, but it's not what they used to do, 100 plus shows a year. They're playing a significant number less than 100 shows a year, but they play a certain number. They made a decision that they're going to play every other day so that they can recuperate. And they made a decision that they are going to play 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. All of these things help them physically, help them mentally to go out and kill every night that they play. It also helps them to decompress when they're not playing and to heal when they're not playing. Because when you've been doing it for 37 years, it's not just age that takes a toll. It's the number of hours that you've been running around on that stage. And believe me, not only playing stadiums with the size of the stage and the amount of miles that you're logging running around on stage, but also when you're playing in arenas, these guys have been playing in the round since 1991, since the Black Album.
That's a lot of movement.
When you play in the round versus playing at one end, you run around a lot more. There are multiple microphones on the stage in the round. All 3 band members that are not sitting at a drum kit are running to those microphones all night long so that everybody in the arena gets their equal share of visibility with each band member that is mobile. So they're logging in a lot of miles every night on stage. Now, look, this isn't to say poor Metallica, that these guys they're taking the toll, but it is so much
they're not
more
30 years
like,
old anymore.
No, but the thing is that it's so much more like these guys are much more like pro athletes than anybody gives them credit for. And I'm not saying Metallica are. I'm saying musicians, professional musicians are like professional athletes.
Well, especially because they're not doing a 75-minute set. They're playing 2 hours plus.
Exactly. They're playing 2 hours plus. They are going for it every night. And again, Metallica are maybe one of the better examples. I'm biased, and I happen to believe they are. But any band that's in the upper echelon, that is successful, that's having longevity at it, they take it very seriously. They've got conditioning people out there on tour with them. They have nutritionists. They have chefs. They're doing things right so that they can play their instruments, so that they can sing, so that they can perform at an incredibly high level every night, which is why you don't hear clams the way you used to at shows. You don't hear as many vocal problems. You don't hear as much feedback like you used to back in the day. You don't have as many, quote unquote, technical difficulties that you used to have, because everybody has upped their game because they want to deliver.
Production's changed over the course of the band's career, not just sound, that's a given, right? You got these huge, massive sound systems that went away to the columns of really good line arrays. That's a given. That's technology. But video wasn't a thing on the Black Album. And the band has become so good at utilizing video, the way that Lars can ham it up for the camera so the people in the back of the house that he can't run around the stadium are seeing his facial expressions. He's really learned how to use that camera as an extra tool. And not all bands know how to do that. Like, that comes over hundreds and hundreds of shows.
It does. But the irony of that is that on this arena tour, we've got a production that's almost the opposite of the stadium show. The stadium show, those screens were a member of the band.
They were massive.
Yeah, they were massive, and they were a part of the band. They were a part of the show.
The scale was ridiculous.
Yes, everything was integrated. On this arena tour, we've integrated, and I forget the exact number, and Dan Brown, who designed the show, will kill me for not knowing the exact number, but I believe it's 48 cubes.
Video cubes.
Video cubes, right. It may be 64, but I think it's 48. They move,
right?
Right. They do just about everything except order you an Uber on the way home. They're remarkable. The only thing is that, the cubes don't come together. They do move, but they can't come together to create, on each side of the stage, one large screen so that you can
blocking
see
everyone.
Right. And we don't have IMAG anyway. So we're not capturing. There are lipstick cams on the stage, so you can see some close-ups of finger work on the guitars and a little bit of the faces and things like that. So yeah, you can see a little bit of Lars.
But nobody's
mugging.
that far in any different direction because you guys are right in the middle of the floor.
Exactly. But it's not the type of thing like, where we had true IMAG and multiple cameras on the stadium show. But as you say, in the arena, they're playing in the round, and there's not a bad
Nobody's
seat.
100 yards back, plus up 5 levels.
Right.
It's a whole different set of problems.
And the idea was that, that Dan, our production designer, and the band, and really, everyone that's involved in designing this show had in mind was, let's create something that is night and day from the stadium show, because, as you've noted earlier, a lot of people go to multiple Metallica shows. So the people that decide, I saw them last summer, that was such a great show, or I'm the ultimate fan, I'm going to go see this show. You want to give them a different looking show. So the stadium show outdoors looks remarkably different from the indoor arena show.
And you guys have done an amazing job of playing markets that no one else necessarily is going to go to. You guys are playing some tertiaries, some Ds. You guys could easily go back and play A's. There's plenty of A's you guys haven't hit, but you guys are particularly going out of your way to play the Spokanes and I want to say Fargos of the world.
No, it was Rapid City, if I'm not mistaken. We played North and South Dakota.
A lot of markets that you would normally choose to route in early. You guys seem like you went out of your way to go hit places you hadn't been.
Yes. That's a combination of Cliff Bernstein at Q Prime and the band and Tony D all sitting down and saying, where haven't we been for a long time? Or in the case of Lincoln, Nebraska, where haven't we ever been? They played Lincoln, Nebraska for the first time ever, which is kind of odd. I mean, they played Omaha a bunch of times.
Pinnacle Bank.
Exactly. So, a number of the shows on this arena tour are cities that the band has not been to in as many as 29 years. And it's pretty remarkable because it becomes a real event. It's almost a holiday in those markets when Metallica comes into those markets to play, because a lot of those cities don't get a lot of shows to begin with. They don't get a lot of A-list bands. The fact that they haven't had a Metallica show in 2+ decades, it's a really big deal. So, you know what? It's a lot of fun for the band because they come in and listen, it's great to play anywhere, and it's great to play a sold out show anywhere, and you don't take anything for granted. But when you come into a market that hasn't had a show in 2+ decades, the energy level is just somehow just goes to another level.
You are a manager that came from a very big management firm, worked with lots of artists. If your band was off cycle, you were helping out with another project. You're always busy one way or another. Now all of your eggs are literally in one basket. Now you're with a band that is probably going to work for a very long time, but you've got a business mind. It's like committing all of your sins to one place. In your mind, that had to be a huge risk and a huge decision factor when you decided to move across country.
Well, gee, Dan, it wasn't until just about 15 seconds ago. Wow.
Really? That's the first time
the hell was I thinking? I got to go. No, it was certainly something that my wife and I thought about long and hard when the opportunity presented itself. But very few people get an opportunity to work with Metallica on a full-time basis. And when you do, you don't say no. I had an incredible run at CBS Records / Sony Music, and it was really hard to leave. But when a company like Q Prime says, come work here, you don't say no. And I had an even better 24-year run at Q Prime. People used to say that CBS Records, then Sony Music, was like going to Harvard Business School. And I would agree with that. But going to work at Q Prime was like becoming a Rhodes Scholar. And the things that I was taught and learned directly and indirectly from Cliff and Peter and all the artists there, it's immeasurable. So as amazing as that was, when Metallica then says, here's an opportunity for you, again, like the previous two opportunities that I had, you can't say no. It's an incredible opportunity. And as much as I loved working with all of the artists at Q Prime that I was fortunate enough to work with, there was always something about Metallica. And it wasn't the fact that they were, arguably commercially the biggest act on the roster. It was that here's a band that's been together now 37 years, but going back years into my tenure at Q Prime, here's a band that was together 20 years at the time, 20 odd years, whatever, 30 years. You could go to them with an idea that was not quite a harebrained idea, but you could go to them with a radical idea. You could go to them with an idea that you may normally think would be reserved for a developing act, because it's like, we're going to take a real chance here. We're going to either win big or lose big with this idea. You could go to a superstar act like Metallica with that idea, and they would ponder it. They would ask a lot of questions in most cases. But if you presented that idea in a positive way and it made sense to Metallica, and in many cases it did, they were all in. You can't say that about a lot of bands at their level and at this point. A lot of bands that have been around for 30 plus years, they're looking to take their victory lap or their victory laps. These guys, they have never thought about a victory lap. They strive to make new music that is relevant. They create productions that are cutting edge. They take a lot of chances. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's incredibly stimulating for someone on the creative / marketing side of things to be able to have an artist at this level that is willing to listen to as many crazy ideas as you can come up with. And in so many cases, will say yes to them. It's a dream.
They have been visionaries all the way through. When you talk about stadiums, they did the Summer Sanitarium tour, 15 years back or something, where they put together this basically Ozfest lineup of metal bands and went out and played huge stadiums and brought all of the bands together, but they made a festival happen and moved around from stadium to stadium every city. Massive scale. Not too many bands in the world are able to do that. The brand is huge. When you guys decided that you guys were going to tour with CID and do some special things for fans, it isn't just a meet and greet. You guys took a museum quality show across the world with you, which had to have been years of building to put that together correctly, to live up to the band standards and make it as amazing as it is. And if you haven't seen it, you got to see it because it's fucking amazing. I don't know there's another band in the world that has ever done anything that cool. It really is a museum exhibit. Without the band, you could park it in any major city and leave it as an exhibit the same way Pink Floyd did in London recently. It's amazing.
Which we may do someday. But that's a testament to the guys at CID who have done this a lot, and who had a lot of great ideas on what works and what doesn't work, and came to us and said, listen, we've done this. Here's what we think can work. Here's how it's worked. Now, you guys can metallicize it. And we did. So it was a fantastic joint effort between CID's experience and know-how and Metallica's know-how of what works for their fans. And the fact that, Lars has amassed the most incredible collection of memorabilia. And the other guys have saved a lot of things as well. James always professed to not have anything. And then we opened up his storage unit and it was like, you've been holding out on us. It's funny because we were very fortunate years ago to work with Jimmy Page when I was at Q Prime. We learned that from working with him, talking to him, and just being around him and doing some catalog reissues with him and things, we learned that the biggest Led Zeppelin fan in the world is Jimmy Page. And he had saved everything. He knew everything about Led Zeppelin. And it was great because when you wanted to do a reissue, a box set, he had it and he knew it. He knew all the bootlegs. He knew everything. I say that because it's the same exact thing with Metallica. The biggest Metallica fan in the world is Lars Ulrich. He remembers everything and he has everything. It's not the easiest thing to pry some things away from him, but once he understood what CID was doing, and then once he saw the museum, how it was set up, he got it completely. And actually, once he saw it set up, he said, oh, well, we need more things. And he actually contributed even more to it. But he has everything. He remembers everything. And that's such a bonus when you have a band member that saves it all from the beginning. You can't go back in time and say, oh, I wish I had the flyer from my first show. I wish I had the lyrics from Master of Puppets. But, you do. Those are the things that, the fans really, really want to see. Then when James says, oh, I've got the cast from when I broke my arm on the Master of Puppets tour and the skateboard still, it's like, that's the kind of stuff that dives so deep that the hardcore fans love seeing that kind of stuff as well.
It's so personal.
Yeah, exactly. And because that's the first time the band ever canceled shows. The hardcore fans know that's the first time they canceled shows. They had a different guy.
And they
John
never
Marshall,
do it. It's a big deal.
Yeah, John Marshall, who was a guitar tech and later in Metal Church, played guitar because James couldn't play, but he could sing. And so they know all that history. Now all of a sudden they're looking, behind glass, they're looking at James's X-ray, the cast, which had a Misfits skeletal logo drawn on it, and there's James's skateboard all
so
drawn
even
in
in pain, he's cool as shit.
Yeah. It's hard not to be cool when it's just
when you're James Hetfield.
When it's just inherent. Yeah.
For bands on a certain level, even when they're off cycle, there's still a lot to manage. There's always things coming in. There's always things to do. When band's off cycle, as a manager, what are you doing at that point? Because obviously when they're on the road, there's a million things to keep straight because you're on deadlines. But when they're off cycle, they're off the road. What are you focusing on then?
Well, there is no off cycle. There are non-show days and there are show days. And that's something that the crew tends to deal with a lot more than I do, than Tony does, than the people at HQ. I mean, sure, we are always busier when they're touring than when they're not touring, but there's never an off cycle. We're fielding tons of requests. We're fielding tons of, I've got a great opportunity for you, which sometimes is a great opportunity, oftentimes isn't, but you've got to listen. You've got to hear these opportunities out because if you don't, you may miss out on something that's really great that will help the band to increase awareness to the fans. It may help find more fans, reach fans, again, do anything. Or it may just be something that's a really cool thing that we've always wanted to do. Again, watches, stance socks, just things that are part of current pop culture that we'd like to be a part of and do something on a limited basis. Our line of Vans sneakers, it was a quick hit. It was very successful. Vans was happy. We were happy, but it's not like you can go into the stores and see them now. We did it.
It's a limited edition, which is what makes it cool.
Right. We had a great time. Will we do it again? Hopefully. I know we'd like to. I think Vans would probably like to. And again, it would be great if it was a limited edition thing. But those are the things that, for the limited edition nature of it, for the fact that everything sold out and it was here today and gone in a few days, there were months and months and months of planning. And Metallica are not a band that will turn over everything to their team at HQ to handle. They are involved. They're involved in the design. They're involved in approving everything. They're involved in promoting things, which is because their fans can see through it if they don't and if they're not involved.
When you got a band like Rodrigo and Gabrielle, like redoing it and opening up to a different part of the world and playing it in such a different way, or Apocalyptica, who's now playing it as a 4-piece cello thing, which is cool as fuck.
Very cool.
And I know the band themselves has played with the symphony in San Francisco, and which is the coolest thing ever that they totally did that. But the idea of seeing their music be rearranged and re-delivered in a completely different way, is that one of those things where it's like, that's an honor and that's amazing? Or is it one of those things like people are changing our vision?
No, I think they're very honored. They're very honored when people are reinterpreting their art. Honestly, I don't know that they're any less moved by Rod and Gab or Apocalyptica or any of the named artists or artists that have a little more notoriety than they are by a Metallica cover band who are playing in clubs. You know, that's an equal honor to them. The fact that kids are learning their songs and going out and playing them, and that people are coming to see these bands playing Metallica covers because they just want to hear a band playing that sound like Metallica. It's an incredible honor.
You're one of the most level-headed guys I know. You don't really lose your shit. I've seen you get mad, but when you get mad, there's a look and then you go to work. You don't tend to lose your shit. You tend to be pretty methodical with the way you think things.
I lose my shit.
I've been lucky then.
No, I'm like the duck on the water, you know, above the surface look good. Underneath it's like, you know.
Well, I think then presentation's clearly part of that. As a manager, is there a way that you have to like keep control of everything and be the guy that has everything together?
Well, the reason why artists hire people to help handle their affairs is because they can't handle all of them themselves, and because they need somebody that can deal with shit in a way that represents them in a positive way.
That's fair. I don't necessarily compare you to any other managers, but at your time at Q Prime, you would probably be considered the calm one.
I heard that on a couple of occasions. There were several calm people there, but yeah, it was kind of a rap that I got.
Do you have any advice for managers coming up in the industry of things they should focus on that might help them to have a longer career like yours?
Wow. Yeah, learn how to write code.
Can you write code?
No, I can't. But man, if you can write code, you're going to have a long career. Maybe not managing acts, but probably. You know, that's a great question. I don't know, Dan. Every manager's different. Some of the greatest managers were amazing promoters. Some of the greatest managers were friends with a musician. You know, they grew up together. Some of the greatest managers were great lawyers. Some of the greatest managers were really good A&R people or had great ears. You know what? I think it's all a matter of just loving the music and wanting to be as close to the artist as you possibly can be without being on the stage yourself. At least that's what I always say. I couldn't play an instrument, and I definitely could not carry a tune. And I wanted to be in this business. And I thought when I was a kid growing up in Albany, New York, that the closest I was going to get was managing a record store. And at the time, that sounded like an amazing job to me. The fact that it's gone this far blows my mind on a daily, if not hourly basis. But, you know, I've been really lucky, really fortunate, but I also know that I've worked really, really hard. And I've worked really, really hard for every act that I've ever been fortunate enough to be around. But the bottom line is just that you just have to love the music, love what you do. And that's not hard to do when you're in this business.
You work for a band that gets so many things offered to them. You couldn't possibly do all of them. Is part of your job being the first line of defense and the filter of knowing what they're going to like and what is just completely absurd to take? Because you don't want to waste their time.
Totally. Yeah. And you're wrong sometimes. Sometimes you say no and it comes back around and somehow they hear about it and they go, why didn't I know about this? And you go, well, I didn't think you were going to care for that. That doesn't happen very often, I'm happy to say, because if it happened a lot, I wouldn't have a job. But yeah, you have to be a filter.
Well, some of the cooler things they've done, I remember when they were on Billions, like early on, that was like, what a cool thing for them to do. It's kind of surprising they did a drama, but it was a really cool drama and they looked badass doing it.
Yeah, but it helped that Brian Koppelman, who was an A&R person at Elektra Records, their label, was the creative person behind Billions, wrote it.
So there was trust there.
Produced it. And yeah, and he also wrote Rounders. You know, so he's a great screenwriter, was an A&R guy in the business, knew Metallica. He kind of had that, he was one of us and one of them mentality. So he had the music business and he had Hollywood experience. And so the band felt very comfortable with what he had in mind.
That's a lot of great insight on how that actually happened. Because that is one of the better cameos I've ever seen. It was so well displayed and the episode was built around them without being overly unrealistic about how involved the band was and how available the band was.
I think you're right. It could have gone wrong 9 ways till Wednesday, because oftentimes they do go wrong. But I think Brian and the entire team, the Showtime people, the entire Billions production team, really made sure that it was as pleasant a shooting experience as it could be, but more importantly, it was as credible an experience as it could have been. And look, to everyone's credit, the band and Q Prime, our publicist Brian Bunbury, everybody was looking out for this thing to make sure that it didn't go south from a credibility standpoint.
Because you don't want to be Andrew Dice Clay on Entourage, where you're the joke of the fucking episode.
No, yeah, but I think Dice did okay, and Dice did an amazing job in A Star Is Born. But yes, there are some bad examples, for sure. More often than not, when you try to do something cool and credible as yourself in a production, it doesn't work.
I want to thank you so much for taking time and doing the podcast.
Thank you. It was an honor.
I just nerd out anytime Marc talks shop. I hope you all enjoyed the session as much as I did. A big thank you to Reiter for taking time away from the slopes and joining me. This was just so much fun to finally have him on the podcast. I can't be a bigger fan of Marc Reiter. So that was so great.
Fergie, tour design. I'm on Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
Dan, it's the name of the show. Can't avoid them. Let's talk about some tweets of this week. You had a few ramblings on the Twitter. Start here. How come your reasonable is much more than my reasonable?
Reasonable is such a hard word to define, particularly difference when we're talking about my money and what you want to become your money.
Am I a professional mediator or a concert promoter?
Really is hard to tell some days.
I wonder if there's a correlation between all the folks I haven't heard from in ages randomly checking in and a major on sale this week.
Anytime we have anything massive go up, it's amazing. It's like, hey, Dan, it's been a long time. Yeah, not long enough, clearly.
That'll do it for Promoter 101 tweets of the week. Make sure you keep up with Dan on Twitter. He's at The Jew.
Michael Goldberg from the Belly Up Aspen, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Up next in the podcast, we're joined by Axs Ticketings Greg Schmale, sitting down to share a war story with us. It's going to be a treat for all you professional wrestling fans.
Here with War Stories with the great Axs Greg Schmale. What do you got for us, Greg?
Thanks, Steiny. This goes back a ways when there was World Wrestling Entertainment and World Championship Wrestling.
The WCW and the WWE, ladies and gentlemen.
You're a huge wrestling fan, Dan.
Monday Night Wrestling Wars on TV.
So we actually, when I was working at Ticketmaster, we had WCW playing at the Forum and WWE playing at the Honda Center, formerly known as the Pond, on the same night. And so we were working with them on some promotional concepts. One of them was a call center contest that would reward the agent that sold the most tickets, some sort of prize. I don't know if you know the history of why WCW came about, but the way I heard it was when WWE's deal came up with Turner, they basically were playing chicken on who made who, whether wrestling made the Turner Network or whether the Turner Network made wrestling. And so McMahon then took the wrestling network license
over to USA.
Turner then decided to spend a lot of money and build his own wrestling network called WCW and hired over all the big name acts like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage.
He bought the NWA and Crockett's and all that stuff.
And brought everybody in.
Georgia wrestling, essentially.
And so it was more of an ego thing that they were trying to see who could sell more tickets. And being at TM, it was like, okay, how do we deal with two clients going head to head? And you're servicing both of them. And so I had one client that on the contest, WWE said, for the agent that sells the most tickets for our event, we'll give them ringside tickets for the show in LA. WCW said, well, we want to one up that. We want to fly the agent all the way down to Florida and we'll put them up for 2 nights in a room with airfare and then give them ringside seats to our event down in Florida. We couldn't have that disparity happen. So kind of went back and told WCW we were sorry. We had to keep the prizes kind of equal to not show favor towards one or the other. So about a week goes by and I get a phone call from WWE, who is livid and said he just did a test call in our call center and that he asked the agent about which wrestling event he should go to because his son likes wrestling. And the agent started to just bash WWE and talk about how great WCW was and how Dennis Rodman was going to show up and just made up all these things. And so the WWE rep immediately thought that we went forward with the promotional campaign to reward somebody with a trip to Florida. And that was why this agent was pushing it. Proceeded to get screamed at for a while, then ran down to find out what happened in the call center to learn that actually the agent was just a huge WCW fan and was going to push WCW
no matter what.
no matter what. That was my first time kind of dealing with two competing clients. And then how do you kind of balance that act of making sure you service both of them equally?
It's funny because growing up as a kid, I watched AWA and WWF. WWF was always a sleeker, better, well-packaged TV show. Vince McMahon created something for all time zones. AWA was a little more rugged, and it was a little bit more like street fight and blood and badass bashing, as was the NWA. And as things matured and NWA became WCW, and all those guys, the old school guys came over that left the WWF as the WWF became WWE, you saw all those legends with the guys that used to be street brawlers, and they were finally like fighting each other. And that was kind of cool because that was the dream that they'd all be in the same place. Because every once in a while you'd see one guy defect to the other federation or vice versa. But to actually get to see Ric Flair fight Hulk Hogan was a cool thing. Like, that's what you always wanted. Like, this was the champion over here forever. This was the champion over here forever. When are those guys ever going to fight? It was like getting to see that stuff was super fucking cool. Like, that was the dream come true. Nerding myself out here, but yeah, WCW was just better than WWE.
I learned a lot off of you about that and how you studied the different regional wrestling networks and learning how the music industry kind of followed suit with that.
Yeah, there are a lot of great books written about the conglomeration of the different regions because it's very mafia-esque about how the 70s and 60s wrestling worked, where there was a champion that would go from circuit to circuit to circuit, very Frank Barcelona promoter network style. And everybody respected everybody else's territories. And Vince McMahon's father, Vince McMahon Sr., who ran the WWF, had the region that was in the Northeast. And he was part of the circuit, and the guys all respected him. But when the kid took over, he didn't care about any of that. He went after everybody. He went after everybody's stars, and he wanted to own it all. He knew TV was the way. But it was interesting to see how that conglomeration happened. And music followed suit not far after with the SFX roll-up of all the promoters and all the territories. It's very similar. So after reading the book and then watching what Sillerman did, I saw his play sheet. His play sheet is he fucking followed Vince McMahon, man. It was really fucking simple. I mean, it can't be that simple, but it really fucking is. And it's just amazing because you like watch it now and it's just like, okay, but can you start another federation? Can you do a thing? It's like you need TV. They used to do TV to promote the shows, and they used to buy time on the local networks to promote the shows so they could sell the shows in each market, and they were regionalized shows. Now they do the shows so they have content for TV, and they'll give tickets away to the show to fill it in so it looks good on TV. They make their money on the fucking TV advertising. It completely reversed itself over time. It's fucking fascinating.
I know. So much crossover. I don't know. I think I told you a story about Richard Branson. His thing wasn't about inventing anything. It was about how to do something better and just looking at things that happened and how you service better. Kind of like WWE. Like, how do you
a better mousetrap?
How do you build a better mousetrap? And Branson, his story was that the way that Virgin Airlines came into being was he was flying to see his girlfriend over the weekend, and he had a connecting flight. And when he got to the airport, he missed the last flight, and it was going to be the next morning until he could get to see his girlfriend. He didn't have much time. And so he actually decided, okay, let me go out and see how much it's going to cost to charter a plane at 11:30 at night to fly me to my girlfriend. And so he found out what the price was. Then he went up to all the passengers that were in the same boat he was in and said, do you guys want to chip in and we'll all fly in tonight? We have to wait till tomorrow. And that was part of what started Virgin Airlines.
That's actually fascinating. I've never heard that story.
That was a story he shared at a conference that I attended. I thought it was amazing that it wasn't about trying to build the mousetrap. It was how do you build the better mousetrap.
I like that. I like that a lot. Greg, it's always an absolute pleasure to have the brains behind Axs Ticketing here on Promoter 101.
Thanks, Steiny.
Greg is godlike in the ticketing world. Thrilled we finally have him on the podcast. Can't wait for a full interview from him. And it's just nice to know that Axs Tickets or anyone over there knows the fucking podcast exists. Hey, that's news.
That is news.
Them and their big, huge ticket stubs. Like, you know what? We're going to kill 5 trees every time we sell a single ticket.
They are massive.
Like folding a road map trying to put their fucking ticket in your pocket.
Like a train ticket in Europe in the 30s. That's what we want our concert tickets to look like.
Maybe Dean or Perez will come on the podcast at some point and explain why it's important that they have such big ticket stubs. Maybe it's like a size of your hands thing.
Were you trying to say my hands are small?
I'm trying to say their stubs are not. Where do you get a printer that prints stubs that big? They do billboards on those things too, right?
It's like they had to design a whole other barcode printer just for these massive stubs, you know?
Anyway, it's great to have Greg on the podcast.
Yeah.
This is Nate Kranz. I'm with First Avenue, Palace Theater, assorted other venues in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I'm excited to be on Promoter 101.
Dan, we've already had two amazing sit-downs, Marc Reiter, Greg Schmale on the podcast, but if that was not enough for you, we're joined now by Psyko Steve's Steve Chilton talking to us about competing as an independent promoter in the very crowded Phoenix marketplace.
Hanging out with Steve Chilton. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Psyko Steve.
Hey, buddy. Excited to be on.
So, a true independent concert promoter.
Completely independent.
Phoenix, Arizona. It's close to my heart, the concept of an indie, a true indie. Phoenix has always been my second market. I grew up in Denver, but Corey Adams and me traded info, and I did some booking for the Nile and traded info and came down and saw shows there. And I learned that market early on and always compared it to Denver. And whenever there was something that was working in Denver that no one else was doing in Arizona, I started doing shows down there. So
seems like a good plan.
The course of your market, the history of your market, from Zalesko to La Pena, the guys in Tucson, to even like Medical Records Presents. Like,
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I go back, dude. So like Terry Burke and Charlie Levy. Your market's rich with history. You work in one of Charlie's offices? You guys have a common workspace?
I used to work in his office. Well, I worked for Charlie for a long time, but the whole time I was working for him, I was doing my own shows too. I was doing my shows. I was working for him. We were doing shows together. And then when I quit working for Stateside and Crescent Ballroom, he was like, well, do you want to still come into the office and keep a desk here? And I was like, hadn't really thought about it. And I was like, sure.
He's so mellow that he just like...
Yeah, it's like he wanted to keep me in the office. We were doing so much business together. So for like 2 years after I quit working for him, I still had a desk in his office. And it gradually, as I was doing more and more that was completely separate from them, it made sense for me to get my own office. And he's expanded so much that eventually he was like, I don't want to kick you out, but if you're not going to come here, I need the desk. And I was like, well, I come here like once every 2 weeks now. Like, it was totally cool. So yeah, very intertwined.
I love what Charlie's built in that market.
It's amazing. All those rooms are great.
The rooms are great. They take care of the bands. The food is incredible. The vibe is cool. They're places you want to hang out.
They are, and that's what he's built in all of them. You know, the side room at Valley Bar or the lounge at Crescent. They're fun spots.
It's a top 10 market. I believe it's number 8, if I remember correctly, by the Nielsen ratings.
I mean, we're the 5th largest city in the country, so it's got to be up there.
Now, here's the thing. It's a poor market with very rich neighborhoods. And it's a lot of have-nots and haves because you're so close to the border. There's a lot of diversity there. Even though the population's there, not everybody can afford a ticket like in the rest of the country based on the population.
Well, the two things there is the demographics and the sort of geography, where Arizona is the second oldest state in the country as far as population, behind only Florida. The average age of a person in Arizona, we're the second oldest state, and it's because we have so many retirees. So it's like, yeah, we're huge, but for my audience, this huge population of retirees or people who've moved there later in life, they're not the ones who are coming to my club shows. So
right.
like,
and it's a snowbird community too with that too.
A lot of snowbirds in and out. But if you're talking about heritage acts, you know, it's this huge population that's perfect for them. So if you're Fleetwood Mac, there's a ton more that demographic there. But for me at the club level, we don't have the same young professional crowd that you do in other cities like Austin or Portland, where you have big young professionals, and we don't have as much of that in Phoenix.
So let's talk about the genre of music. How did you get into it? Because they're heavier shows for the most part.
Somewhat are, some aren't. I started by promoting DIY shows at this little art gallery called Modified Arts. The first show I was ever involved in any way, I promoted. I was going to way more shows than all my friends in high school. I was like 17 at the time, and I knew all the venues. I knew more bands because I was going to tons of shows, and all my friends that were in bands didn't know anybody. And I was like, I can help you get a show, and was calling Modified in the Nile and like, hey, can I get this band on the show? Everyone was telling me no in retrospect because I was trying to help my crappy friends' bands. And then Scott at Modified was like, well, I'm never going to put these bands on these shows you're asking about, because I was asking about all the cool hipster indie shows. He's like, I can't put these bands on that, but I can give you a Friday and you can book the show and you can book whoever you want. And I went, I could do that. And he gave me a Friday. I called my friends. They were like, do you want to play a Modified on this date? And then the show did well. You know, it was a 100 cap room and we filled it. And at the end of the night, Scott was like, here's all the money. And I was like, all right, what do I do with this? And he's like, well, what did you promise the bands? And I was like, we never discussed it, you know? And he's like, okay. And he like grabbed a flyer and showed me my first settlement sheet. And we did all the math on the show. And he's like, you know, here's what I'm taking for the room. What did you spend on flyers? Here's all the bands. And we just did a basic settlement on a flyer. And that was the first show I ever settled.
Well, that's pretty cool that he held your hand through that.
Yeah, it was like, then I did a couple more shows, and it was like very gradual start of always just helping friends bands. That's why I would start it. And then other bands were like, we saw you were doing shows there. Could you get us a show there? And I was like, we've got some touring bands coming through and you have the date. And I was like, yes, I can book real bands on this show. And did a show with Limbeck, was the first touring band I ever did. And that was all that first stage was just helping friends and then their friends. Then later I went to work for AMJ, which was Will Anderson and Mike Jarmez and Sam Means. Sam Means, who went on to be half of the format, box office, flyering, doing all sorts of helping them put locals on shows. And meanwhile, still doing my own shows. It just gradually got more and more.
Started doing volume and making money on it. Did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to ASU, graduated degree in philosophy, and did shows the whole time. Didn't do the College Board or the shows on campus, because when I was a freshman, all the shows they booked were so lame. It was just like the lamest like pop stuff. And I was like, that's so not cool. I'm this punk rock dude. And then this girl, Jessica Hill, was the year I got it. So when I was a senior, she was doing it, and she was booking all the coolest bands and all the indie bands. And it was like, oh, fuck, I missed out on that, because she would book what she wanted to. And so the couple of years behind me, and she's now the assistant GM at the Van Buren. But it was like, oh, wait, you could do that job cool. And like a year or two behind was this guy, Andy Neese, who used to help me with shows, but he's now an agent at WME.
Everybody kind of went on to something. That's kind of neat. Did you tell me that you worked for LaPenna at some point?
I had interned for AMJ. Then Will Anderson went to work for Tom at NIPP. And when NIPP first came into the market.
Nobody in particular presents Kaufman, Jesse Marielli, Chris Swank.
Yeah. The first staff at the Marquee was all Denver guys that came down, Mike Lee and Grasher Johnson. They come down and run the venue for Tom through NIP. And I started doing all the flyering. Like Will called me and was like, their flyer guy sucks. They're not doing it.
And Will knew how to flyer because Will was a flyer guy for Corey. He was good.
He was good. And so I was hitting 150 stores a week back kind of the end of that era of just flyering everywhere. And it was great because they were paying me to drive all around town, and then I could take my stuff too. So it was like, I was just still doing DIY shows. I wasn't doing anything that noteworthy yet. And my shows were everywhere right next to all the marquee shows. And it was like, here's the Newfound Glory show, and right next to it, some local show I was doing. It was a good trade-off.
Ironically, I had the poster up for Nobody in Particular when I started doing my shows too. And Doug's paying for my gas and giving me some money to do that. Definitely made it so it was easier for me to keep afloat for a little while. So
that's funny, the parallel there.
I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the Electric Ballroom is my early memories of like the
that
first
is closed before I really started going to punk rock shows.
I remember seeing Tom LaPenna sell merch for a band the night before the Beastie Boys. I was a young indie and he was working for Danny. And, it was one of those things where it was just like, I went in for the Beasties. And he was like, hey, come out the night before. Come see this band. I'm really into them. We'll hang out. I'll grab a beer with you at the show. And I went in. I don't remember who the band was. I just thought it was funny because they didn't have a merch guy. And after the set, Tom grabbed a box and jumped off the stage. I got T-shirts and was like selling T-shirts for the band because they didn't have someone to do that for him. And he was hustling for him. It was like wanted people to buy their shirts, wanted to get them some gas money. And I just thought that was the coolest thing because Electric Ballroom was the ballroom. And obviously now you guys have the Marquee and now you got the Van Buren and the venue's obviously built up. Charlie's a big deal to do with that. But there are a lot of rooms in town. Now you have your own as well?
Yeah. So I quit working for Stateside like 4 or 5 years ago for a year, just doing shows everywhere and largely in his rooms. And then a friend of mine saw that the Mason jar was for sale again and was like, we should do this. And we kind of looked at it for a little bit and we're like, yeah, this seems like the right next step, the right size that I knew I could book. Looked at it and was like, wait, I'm doing 200 shows a year that are this size. It's not that foreseeable that I add another 100, and fill a calendar. So it's been really cool. Just the history of that room in Phoenix. Everyone who grew up in Phoenix has some story about the Mason jar.
Okay, so you run in your own room. You're promoting shows. How many shows a year?
This year we did 575.
That's a lot of fucking volume.
Granted, 150 of that are local shows at Rebel. So, a lot of small Rebel shows, but still a lot of shows.
You got this can-do attitude, which I really like, and I think a lot of indies should have. I feel like we met each other at South by maybe 6-7 years ago. It goes back.
That sounds right. I think it was South by.
I remember I think I've had 1 or 2 shows come through, and I'm just like, hey, they're early days, but I'll keep you involved, but we should do these. It's small, but let's try them. And you're like, all right, you want to send you a link? You're like, no, if you're into it, let's just do it. I was like, and I told you, we're not going to get rich, but we won't lose much. But I think there could be something here.
I mean, that is most of what I do. And it's like, I really like working with bands at that level. Part of the interest in opening Rebel was having that room where it's like, I can do those shows where it's the first play. I can control the staff and have things done the way I want it to be done. And I love doing tons of small shows and new bands, and lots of them aren't going to go anywhere. And some of the other ones are going to be huge.
We did the No Sleep podcast together, and Andrea Johnson booked that tour, and she was like, I want to play Phoenix. So I was like,
that was neat.
This will be interesting, but I don't think we can get hurt. And you're like, yeah, great, let's try it.
Yeah, I do stuff all over the map, everything from death metal to country, indie rock, punk rock. And it's like, I couldn't imagine doing like a genre or like always have the same show. It's like every night is a different show. Everything is interesting in its own way.
Well, and I agree with that, because you don't want to like cannibalize your own audience, because you can't sell tickets to metal audience every single night. They're going to run out of money.
Especially from the venue side. Yeah.
Right. Totally. You're in the same market, right?
Yeah.
But you've branded yourself Psycho Steve, and that kind of leads me to believe it's going to be hard for you to get Tori Amos dates.
That started literally as a joke in high school. I was doing some shows, and some friends of mine that were the same group of bands that played the first shows, they had started calling me that, and absolutely no idea why. It's definitely not totally positive, and kids being kids, just joking around. And then when I started doing shows, they'd done a couple, and one of them came up and he's like, you should put Psycho Steve Presents on the flyer. And so the next show I did. I put it on the flyer, and everyone like laughed and was like, that's so funny. And now 18 years later, so there was no thought about, can I ever get a Tori Amos date with this? And early on, I felt definitely when I started to work with real agents and started like reaching out on stuff, was very self-conscious about it. And now I kind of don't think about it.
You could almost have an adult contemporary brand with that. Psychologist Steve Presents. Picture of you, but with like a monocle.
I always like to think it's ironic, and especially early on when I was doing shows with like Throwdown and Terror and Darkest Hour and the Casualties, and they'd walk in and then be just nerdy college kid, like never had tattoos, is the nerdiest little kid, and they're like, you're Psycho Steve, and they're just like looking at me like something's wrong. It's like they're expecting to see some crazy promoter, and it's like
wrestler vibe.
Didn't look like the guy that would be doing a Throwdown show.
So you're here at Aspen Live.
Yeah.
I always say that South by is like high school, Polestar and Billboard are college, and this is grad school.
I like that analogy, and that was kind of the order I went in those things.
There's definitely good business to be had at all of them. This is a little bit higher end room where people are moving faster. Nobody's explaining terms because everyone in the room has done a certain level of business. It's not that you can't come if you don't know that stuff, but it's a little harder. It's an investment, and it moves fast, and the guys that are in the room are serious guys and women. You, during a session the other day, made a comment about the number of pre-sales on a GA's show, which I think you said were 9 for this particular show, and then it only wound up selling 30 tickets over the 9 pre-sales.
Yeah.
And GA show, it's going to sell at the end, right? It was just kind of funny. These pre-sales are getting ridiculous, and they're confusing people, right?
They are.
It was a pretty good chip shot that you had in your first session in that room, which I got to imagine you may have been a little on the edge of, do I make this comment or not? Is that, it could be a little intimidating in that room.
I've gotten to enough Polestars and things where it's like I'm not afraid to kind of say that or throw a different opinion in there, or especially coming from like dramatically different seat and where my position in the industry than, a lot of people in the room. So I do have a different perspective than some of those guys.
So what was really funny about that was fast forward 4 hours and Bob Lefsetz cited you on that. He called you some promoter.
I'll take it.
You caught that, right?
I did catch that.
Okay. That had to be kind of cool, right?
No, I read that next
paying
morning.
Dividends already. You're Lefsetz's letter. You are some promoter. So you run a business. How many employees do you have?
On the Psycho Steve side, we've got 3 employees in the office every day. And then, venue staff at the venue, bartenders, all that. So probably another 20 employees at any given time at Rebel.
Now, is Rebel one business and is Psycho Steve another business? You do have 2 sets of books and 2 sets?
Yeah, we do 2 sets of books.
2 EINs?
2 businesses. I kind of always view them very separately, but it's very intertwined.
So does Psycho Steve rent Rebel?
Psycho Steve does rent Rebel when we do a show there. Kind of actually just copy the model of Charlie and copy that because that was how Charlie always did it. Kept Stateside and Crescent separate. So
Charlie rents the Crescent when he does a show there?
Yeah, and I don't know all the details on that. So I keep them separate.
Does Rebel promote shows in-house when you do like local bands?
Yeah, and there's sometimes where we decide whether it's a Psycho Steve show or Rebel show because it's the same team. But the Psycho Steve office is doing all the marketing for Rebel, all the booking for Rebel. So our day-to-day workflow, it's almost one entity, So we're booking the shows the same way. And sometimes it's a deciding, is this a show that's going on Psycho Steve's books or is this on Rebel? Most of the local stuff is Rebel. Every once in a while, if I'm booking something where I go, Psycho Steve would never do this, but it's a good bar one or something, or good, we'll keep it on. Rebel's books and not mine. But
Got it.
yeah, so just
might need the bar to make this one work.
Yeah, no, but if it's like this one really is something about the bar for Rebel, let it be on Rebel.
So Rebel made money last year?
We're making money.
This year that we're coming to the end of?
Hopefully it's making some money.
Okay, and then Psyko Steve Presents?
Psyko Steve Presents is making money. You know, we've doubled the number of shows and the number of tickets we've done in the last 2 years.
Oh, that's great growth.
Yeah, more than doubled how many tickets we sold
total.
total.
You opened the room?
Well, no, 16, the room was already open. So we've done a lot more in the room is definitely a big piece of it. But Rebel already existed. We opened in 15, so we doubled what we did in 16. But it is one where 16, I had one part-time employee. Now I've got two full-time and one that's almost full-time. We're going to gross dramatically more, but the net, who knows, some growing pains, probably be about the same or less. You know, but being an indie, it always has to be positive.
Right. You don't settle the year on the night, but every month you try to make money, and the hope is every quarter makes money. And obviously you need the year to make money because there's nothing else protecting that.
Yeah, and the fun one where we are right now that I'm excited about is I always saw Rebel as a big key for developing artists. And it's like, this is what makes it easier for me to take those chances on the small things and take a chance on something that hasn't been tested in the market. And the idea of growing Axs, and we're 3 years in. So we're now this year really saw a ton of artists that we've worked with that we're now taking into Crescent, taking into Van Buren, taking into Club Red. So, you know, it's like we sold out Club Red with Chon. We sold out Crescent with Mitski. We're sold out the Frights at Crescent, Polyphia, tons of artists, maybe like a dozen this year that we're selling out much bigger rooms at Rebel that we developed. The first album was at Rebel and now we're taking into bigger rooms, which was always the goal. And that's starting to happen. We're seeing the first of those acts that came out of Rebel.
Okay, so that's awesome. So so everybody seems to get along with you. There's not a room in town that won't let you in, right?
Yeah, I do shows almost everywhere. I co-promote with everybody. So it's like I do shows with Lapena. I do shows with Stateside and Live Nation. I do shows with some of the metal promoters and the punk rock promoters and Michael Horowitz at UM. And sometimes I co-promote with the venues. I always want to be someone who wants to work with everyone, you know, work with you when you want to come into town. I'd rather work with everyone on something than not be a part of it.
Yeah, it makes sense and certainly builds relationships.
Yeah.
What's the biggest show you'll do this year?
This year I had the Front Bottoms at Van Buren. I had co-promoted Frank Turner with them at Van Buren. The biggest one I'm working on is coming up in January. We're doing a festival with the band The Main. It's their festival, 8123 Fest, producing it with their manager. And we've got Mayday Parade, Real Friends, We the Kings, Teenage Wrist, and yeah, it's fun. We've sold about 3,000 tickets to people outside of Arizona who are coming to see their festival.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, a little band curated festival.
Do you have hopes to grow this into doing arena shows and doing the Mesa Amphitheater? And
definitely want to keep growing. And, you know, I'm now bringing bands into the Van Buren and doing 2,000 tickets. It'd be nice to take some of those bands to the next level next time.
Do you have a relationship with Danny Zalesko?
I've never done shows with him, but he's a legend in the town. So yeah.
Our friendly.
Yeah, we're friendly. I've never really competed with him ever. You know, I've been doing shows in the same market 18 years and he's not going after the little club shows.
You
and
didn't
I
have
don't
an offer for Billy Joel?
Yeah, I did not get
going after Pink?
I did not get offered Billy Joel.
Let's be friendly because find out why you didn't get the call.
Yeah, and it's you know, we just never had to compete, so we could be friendly because we're not.
Danny's a friendly guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the goal? What's the future?
I've never had a goal, and it's just always just keep doing what I'm doing. You know, hopefully a lot of these newer acts we're working with are acts that are huge in the next few years. You know, and it's like we're working on Soccer Army and The Garden and some fun acts at King Buffalo that, you know, most of the people at this conference haven't heard of yet, and hopefully in the next few years they do, and we're still working on it.
Well, Psyko Steve in the house.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time, man.
Thank you.
Thrilled to have Steven on the podcast. He's been a friend of the podcast for so long. I'm so excited for his success that he's found with opening his venues and promoting all over the Phoenix area. Got to check out Psyko Steve and some of the upcoming stuff he's doing. He's really one of the younger guys on the grow and on the move in the industry.
Just a big fan of Steve Chilton. If you don't know him, seek him out, get to know him. One of the sharpest guys working in the business. Great perspective on things as an indie. Really, really sharp. Really enjoy that guy.
Agreed. I concur. I should have concurred. I concur.
You concurred. Ratified.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Hi, this is Melanie Davis. I am the tour marketing director for ICM Partners. I'm on Promoter 101.
Well, there's just no better way to name drop a whole bunch of people really fast than to announce the birthdays of the week for December 14th to 20th, 2018, here on the Promoter 101 Podcast Network.
On Friday, December 14th, wishing a happy birthday to Ryan Blazer and Molly Fitzgerald.
Saturday, the 15th of December, legendary New York concert promoter, Randy Henna, and Call Your Mother.
Call your mother. On Sunday the 16th, a man over at Eventbrite Music, founder of TicketWeb and Ticketfly, Mr. Andrew Dreskin turns 50. I wonder what he's going to be doing to celebrate, Dan.
Something that has something to do with online.
Selling some tickets.
He is the godfather of online ticketing. First ticket ever sold online was done by Andrew Dreskin. I mean, he'll go down in history as the first guy to make money on the internet off of music fans that wanted to go to concerts. That's amazing.
He started the secondary scalper craze, Dan.
He would not love that you said that, but let's leave it in. What the fuck? Monday, the 17th. Rich Mills, Paula Palazzo, Steven Severin, Jack McFadden, and Sam McGregor. Wow, it's a big day on Monday.
A lot of birthdays on Monday. On Tuesday, the 18th, wishing a happy birthday to Brandon Frankel and Paradigm's Joe Atanian.
Wednesday, the 19th, wrestling fan Mean Gene Okerlund. And from the BOK Center, Jeff Nickler.
On Thursday, the 20th, wishing a happy birthday to Top Shelf, Randy Vogel himself, Mike Mills, and Mike Sturgill.
And to everyone that didn't have a birthday this week, happy unbirthday to all of you. What the fuck?
Happy whatever week it is on the way to your birthday.
This is Tom LaPenna, Lucky Man Concerts Marquee Theater, and I'm on Promoter 101.
The quote of the week comes to us from The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Appear weak when you're strong, and strong when you are weak. Kind of deep there. Fuck with your mind a little bit, huh, Luke?
A very philosophical way to wrap up this podcast. And now that we've got the quote of the week in the bag, we're pretty much out of the show. But we're going to be back next week, friends. We got some more podcasts coming up. Episode 114 of Promoter 101 will be back here. Same pod time, same pod place. I have to give a big shout out thanks to all of our amazing guests this week, including Metallica HQ's Marc Reiter, Axs Ticketings Greg Schmale, and Psyko Steve himself, Steve Chilton, sitting down for this podcast. Thank you to all of our guests and for everyone tuning in today.
If you have something to say to us, you got some feedback, you got something on your chest, feel free to hit us up by emailing us at steiny@promoter101.net. Check in, tell us what you're thinking. If you're listening, if you particularly find Luke's pants a particularly odd shade of gray, that's a new thing. I noticed that you didn't have any Crayola colored jeans on this week in Aspen, but apparently gray is a color too. So that happened.
I do own more than one pair of non-pastel colored pants. It's most of the time in the winter, it's black jeans.
Well, that makes me sad because I think the world needs to know that the pastels of Luke's pants make us all happy.
Oh, just wait till springtime, baby. Bringing them out.
Anyway, email us at steiny@promoter101.net and tell us about your favorite colored pants that Luke should be wearing or does wear, or what have you. And maybe a sweater vest to match. Why not?
We'll be back next week for episode 114 of Promoter 101. We're going to be sitting down with the marketing genius from Concerts West, the one, the only Amy Morrison, here talking about the massive promotion she just rolled out for the Rolling Stones and the U.S. Stadium Tour. Great stuff coming in next week's podcast. Be sure to tune in.
That promotion to sell out that Stones Stadium run so quickly was amazing the way she rolled that out. Can't wait to hear her break that down for us. But until then, we're wishing you sold out shows for the week to come.
Cheers, motherfuckers.
Call your mother.
Call your mother.
She's worried. You look thin. Call your mother.
John Blaffer, lawyer. Promoter 101.